The stars looked the same as they always had. Captain Taemin stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the endless darkness through the main window. He had been exploring space for 15 years, but the sight still made him feel small. His ship, the Crystal Dawn, moved slowly through the outer edge of known space. They were looking for new worlds, new resources, anything that might help the three great species of the galaxy. Taemin was Viridian, his body made of living crystal that sparkled blue and green in the ship's lights. His people were traders and explorers, always searching for profit and knowledge. "Captain," called Yejin from her station. She was Sathari, an aquatic being who lived in a special water suit that covered her entire body. Through the clear material, Taemin could see her gill slits opening and closing as she breathed the filtered water. "I'm picking up something strange on the long-range sensors." Taemin walked over to her station. The Sathari were the best navigators in the galaxy. If Yejin said something was strange, it probably was. What kind of strange? "It's an energy signature, but it's very old. The computer says it's been out there for thousands of years." Yejin's voice bubbled slightly through her water suit. "The pattern doesn't match any known technology from our three species." From across the bridge, Boram clicked her mandibles together. The Thixari engineer looked like a giant insect, with 6 arms that could work on multiple tasks at once. "Perhaps it is debris from an ancient war. The outer rim has many old battlefields." Taemin studied the readings on Yejin's screen. The energy signature was weak but steady, like a heartbeat that had been beating for millennia. Something about it made his crystalline skin feel cold. "How old does the computer think it is?" "At least 20,000 years, Yejin replied. "Maybe older, 20,000 years. That was around the time of the Great Silence, when the 4th species had vanished from the galaxy. Taemin had learned about them in school, but most people thought they were just stories. The humans, they were called. Beings of flesh and bone who had traveled the stars long ago, then disappeared without explanation. "Set course for the signal," Taemin ordered, "but keep our shields up and weapons ready." The Crystal Dawn changed direction, its engines humming softly. As they got closer to the source of the signal, their sensors began picking up more details. It was definitely a ship, but unlike anything in their databases. The vessel was huge, easily 3 times the size of their own ship and shaped like a long spear with strange curves along its hull. "Captain?" Boram's voice carried a note of concern. "The ship's design is not in any of our records. The materials appear to be metal alloys that we stopped using thousands of years ago." Taemin felt his crystal skin growing colder. "Could it be a human ship?" The bridge fell silent. Even though the 3 species had been exploring space for 20,000 years, they had never found any trace of the humans. No ruins, no artifacts, no explanation for where they had gone. Some scientists believed they had never existed at all. "The energy signature is getting stronger," Yejin reported. "It's like the ship is waking up." On the main screen, the ancient vessel slowly grew larger as they approached. Its hull was dark and scarred, marked by countless impacts from space debris and cosmic radiation. But along its sides, Taemin could see strange symbols carved into the metal. They looked like writing, but not from any language he knew. "Boram, start scanning for life signs," Taemin ordered. "Yejin, try to establish communication." "No life signs detected," Boram reported after a moment. "But there are power readings coming from the ship's core. Something is definitely active in there." Yejin worked at her station, sending out communication signals on every frequency they knew. For several minutes, there was nothing but static. Then suddenly a new sound filled the bridge. It was a pattern of beeps and tones, completely unlike anything they had heard before. "It's responding," Yejin said, her voice excited. "The ship is trying to communicate with us." The strange sounds continued for several minutes, then stopped. On their screens, new symbols appeared. The ship's computer was trying to translate, but it was having trouble with the ancient language. "I think it's sending us docking instructions," Yejin said finally. "There's a bay opening on the side of the ship." Taemin watched as a section of the ancient vessel's hull slowly opened, revealing a dark space inside. Lights flickered on, weak but steady, showing a docking bay that looked like it hadn't been used in thousands of years. "Captain," Boram said quietly, "this could be dangerous. We don't know what's on that ship." Taemin nodded. His people were careful by nature, and Boram was right to be concerned. But this was the discovery of a lifetime. If this really was a human ship, it could answer questions that had puzzled the galaxy for 20,000 years. "We'll take a small team aboard," he decided. "Boram, you're with me. Yejin, you too." And contact Dalsu in the archaeology department. He'll want to see this. Dalsu arrived on the bridge within minutes. He was Viridian like Taemin, but older, with crystal formations that had grown more complex over his long life. He studied ancient cultures and dead civilizations, and his eyes went wide when he saw the ship on their screens. By the 7 crystals, he whispered. If this is what I think it is, what do you think it is? Taemin asked. A ghost ship, Dalsu replied. The humans were said to have built vessels that could travel between the stars for thousands of years without stopping. Ships that carried their dead and their sleeping, waiting for some signal to wake them up. Taemin felt another chill run through his crystalline body. Wake them up from what? That's what we need to find out. They prepared carefully for the boarding. Each of them wore environmental suits and carried emergency equipment. Taemin also brought a small security team just in case. As their shuttle approached the ancient ship's docking bay, he could see more details of its construction. The hull was covered in symbols and markings that seemed to tell a story. There were images of stars and planets, strange creatures that might have been humans, and scenes that looked like battles in space. Some of the carvings were so old they were barely visible, worn down by cosmic radiation and time. Their shuttle settled into the docking bay with a soft thud. The ancient ship's system sealed the bay and began filling it with atmosphere. Their sensors confirmed that the air was breathable, though it tasted stale and old when they finally removed their helmets. The ship is definitely old, Boram confirmed, studying her readings. But someone or something has been maintaining the basic systems. The power core is still functioning, and there's artificial gravity throughout the vessel. They walked deeper into the ship, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. The walls were lined with more symbols and what looked like memorial plaques. Dalsu stopped at each one, trying to understand the ancient writing. These aren't just decorations, he said after examining several plaques. They're records. Names, dates, locations. It's like a history of the ship and its crew. At the end of the main corridor, they found a massive door marked with symbols that pulsed with faint light. As they approached, the door slowly opened, revealing a chamber filled with strange technology. Screens and control panels covered the walls, and in the center of the room stood a pedestal with a glowing crystal formation. Suddenly, the crystal began to pulse brighter, and a voice filled the chamber. It spoke in the ancient human language, but their translators were starting to work now, slowly converting the words into something they could understand. Welcome, the voice said. You have found the eternal vigil. We have been waiting for 20,000 years. The time of the long sleep is ending. The stars are aligning for war once again. The crystal pulsed one more time, then went dark, but around the chamber, other systems were beginning to activate. Screens flickered to life, showing star maps and data streams that none of them could understand. Taemin looked at his team, seeing his own fear and excitement reflected in their faces. They had found something incredible, something that would change everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. But the ship's message worried him. War? What war? And what had the humans been waiting for all these years? As if in answer to his thoughts, new alarms began sounding throughout the ancient vessel. On the screens around them, warnings appeared in multiple languages, including some that their computers were slowly learning to translate. Proximity alert, the ship's voice announced. Unknown vessels approaching. Threat assessment extreme. All personnel to battle stations. The enemy has returned. Outside the ship, space itself began to change. Dark shapes moved between the stars, things that seemed to absorb light itself. The 20,000-year wait was over. The humans had been sleeping for a reason, and now that reason was coming home. The alarms stopped as suddenly as they had started. The dark shapes that Taemin had seen moving between the stars were gone, as if they had never been there at all. But the ancient ship's systems remained active, humming with energy that had been sleeping for 20,000 years. What were those things? Hyejin asked, her voice shaking through her water suit. I don't know, Taemin replied, studying the screens around them, but the ship's computer seemed to recognize them. Dalsu was already working at one of the control panels, his crystalline fingers moving carefully over the strange symbols. The writing here is becoming clearer as the translation system learns. Look at this. He pointed to a section of text that was slowly changing from alien symbols to words they could understand. It says something about the Devourers and the Long Watch. There are references to a war that happened before the 3 species even existed. Boram clicked her mandibles nervously. If these humans were fighting a war 20,000 years ago, where did they go? And where is their enemy? Before anyone could answer, the crystal in the center of the room began to glow again. This time, instead of just a voice, a figure appeared above it. The hologram showed a being unlike any of them had ever seen. It was tall and thin, with pale skin and long dark hair. It wore what looked like a military uniform covered in symbols and badges. "I am Captain Hyun Seo of the Earth vessel Eternal Vigil," the hologram said. The translation was getting better now, and her words were clear. "If you are receiving this message, then our sensors have detected the return of the Devourer scouts. The long sleep must end." The hologram turned to look directly at Tae-min as if she could see him. "You are not human. Your species are new to us. But if you have found this ship, then you have advanced enough to help us wake the others." "Others?" Tae-min said aloud, though he knew the hologram couldn't hear him. Captain Hyun Seo continued speaking. "This ship carries 50,000 of my people in deep sleep. They have been waiting for this moment when the ancient enemy returns to threaten all life in this galaxy. We are the Guardians, created to fight what others cannot fight." The hologram gestured to the screens around them, and new images appeared. They showed star maps with hundreds of marked locations spread across the galaxy. At each location, a small symbol pulsed with red light. "Our fleet consists of 200 ships like this one, hidden throughout the galaxy. Each ship carries sleeping warriors and the knowledge needed to fight the Devourers. But we cannot wake them all ourselves. We need help." Dalsu was frantically taking notes, trying to record everything the hologram was saying. "This is incredible," he whispered. "An entire civilization in suspended animation waiting for 20,000 years. The hologram of Captain Hyun Seo raised her hand, and the images changed again. Now they showed creatures that made Taemin's crystalline skin crawl with fear. The things looked like darkness given form, with tentacles and mouths that seemed to eat light itself. "The Devourers are not from this dimension," the captain explained. "They exist partially outside normal space and time. They feed on life force itself, consuming entire worlds before moving on to the next. Our creators, an ancient race that no longer exists, designed us specifically to fight them." Yejin moved closer to the crystal, studying the hologram with fascination. She's speaking as if she's still alive, but this message could be thousands of years old. "No," said a new voice from behind them. "The message is real time." They turned to see the door sliding open. Through it walked another human, this one clearly alive and breathing. He was shorter than the hologram, with black hair and kind eyes, but he wore the same type of uniform. His movements were slow and careful, as if he had just woken from a very long sleep. "I am Jin Ho," he said, his words coming through their translators. "I am the first to be awakened. Captain Hyun Seo merged with the ship's computer system 5,000 years ago to keep watch while the rest of us slept." Taemin stepped forward cautiously. After 20,000 years, he was looking at a living human being. "You've been asleep for 20,000 years?" Jin Ho nodded. "Our technology allows for very long sleep periods. We age only one day for every 100 years that pass. But the captain chose a different path. She became part of the ship itself, keeping watch for the enemy's return." The hologram of Captain Hyun Seo turned to look at Jin Ho. "Report on the awakening process." "Systems are functioning normally," Jin Ho replied. "The first 1,000 crew members are beginning to wake. The ship's manufacturing systems are producing new equipment and weapons. We will be ready for combat in 48 hours. Boram's 6 arms moved nervously. "Combat, are you planning to fight someone?" "Not someone," Jin Ho said grimly. "Something. The Devourers consume everything they touch. Planets, stars, entire solar systems. They turn living worlds into empty space. And they're coming back." Captain Hyun Seo's hologram gestured to the star maps again. "Our scouts detected their advanced ships 3 days ago. They are still at the edge of the galaxy, but they move quickly. We estimate they will reach inhabited systems within 6 months." Taemin felt a chill run through his entire body. 6 months? "We need to warn our governments, prepare our fleets." "Your fleets cannot fight them," Jin Ho said sadly. "We tried that before 20,000 years ago. The 3 species that existed then had mighty armies and powerful weapons. The Devourers destroyed them all in a matter of weeks." Dalsu looked up from his note-taking. "What makes you different? How can humans fight something that destroyed entire civilizations?" Jin Ho walked to one of the control panels and placed his hand on it. The moment his skin touched the surface, the entire panel came alive with new energy. Lights danced under his fingers, and the ship's systems responded in ways that seemed impossible. "Our creators changed us," he explained. Humans exist partially in the same dimensional space as the Devourers. We can touch them, hurt them when others cannot. But the price was high. We became something not quite natural, not quite normal. As he spoke, Jinho's body began to glow with a soft light. His eyes changed color, shifting from brown to a deep purple that seemed to contain swirling galaxies. The air around him shimmered like heat waves. We are living weapons, he continued. Each human carries the genetic memory of our creators and the ability to manipulate dark matter and energy. But using these abilities changes us, makes us less human over time. Ye Jin swam closer to her viewing port, studying Jinho with scientific curiosity. Is that why you went into the long sleep? To preserve your humanity? Partly, Captain Hyunseo's hologram answered. But mainly because we knew the Devourers would return eventually. Our creators foresaw this day. They designed us to wait, to preserve our strength and knowledge until the enemy came back. More humans began entering the chamber. They moved slowly, like people waking from a very long dream. Each one looked different, but they all had the same strange quality that Taimin had noticed in Jinho. They seemed more solid than normal beings, as if they existed more completely in reality. A woman with short hair and bright eyes approached the group. I am Su Jin, the ship's science officer. We have been monitoring your communications with this vessel. Your 3 species have spread far across the galaxy since we began our sleep. Can you really defeat these Devourers? Taimin asked. Sujin and Jinho exchanged glances. We can fight them, she said finally. We were created for this purpose. But victory is not guaranteed. 20,000 years ago we managed to drive them away, but only barely, and we paid a terrible price. What kind of price? Boram asked. Most of our people died, Jinho said quietly. Of the millions of humans who lived before the war, only a few 100,000 survived to enter the long sleep. And even now, we are not the same beings we once were. Captain Hyunseo's hologram flickered, and when it stabilized, she looked older and more tired. The enemy is moving faster than we expected. Our outer sensors detect more scout ships arriving every hour. We must begin waking the other vessels immediately. How can we help? Taimin found himself asking, though he wasn't sure why. Contact your governments, the captain replied. Tell them what you have learned here. The 3 species must work together if any are to survive what is coming, and we will need your ships and resources to support our awakening fleet. Jinho stepped closer to Taimin. But be warned. Your leaders may not believe you. They may see us as a threat rather than protectors. Humans are not like other species. Our abilities, our purpose, our very existence can be frightening to those who don't understand. Through the ship's viewing ports, Taimin could see space beginning to change. New energy signatures were appearing on the sensors, and the stars themselves seemed to flicker strangely. Something vast and hungry was moving through the darkness between worlds. The awakening has begun, Captain Hyunseo announced. Signal beacons are activating across the galaxy. 200 ghost ships are waking from their long sleep. The final war is about to begin. As if summoned by her words, the ship's communication system came alive with new signals. Voices speaking in the ancient human language filled the chamber. Reports from captains and crews who were awakening after 20,000 years of dreams. The news of humanity's return spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within days of Taimin's first report, every major government and news service was talking about the ghost ships and their sleeping warriors. But the reactions were not what anyone had hoped for. On the crystal world of Viridios Prime, the High Council met in emergency session. Jae-won, the eldest member and most respected leader of the Viridian people, stood before the great crystal assembly. His ancient body sparkled with wisdom accumulated over 3 centuries of life. These humans claim to be our protectors, he said, his voice echoing through the crystal chambers. But they carry weapons we do not understand and powers that defy our science. How do we know they are not the real threat? In the deep ocean cities of Sithari, the Depths Assembly gathered in their vast underwater halls. Hun-hee, the current speaker for the Depths, floated in the center of the circular chamber. Her ancient wisdom was respected by all, and her words carried great weight. The human ship's data shows creatures of terrible power approaching our galaxy, she said to the assembled leaders. But we have no proof these devourers exist. Perhaps the humans have invented this threat to justify their return. The insectoid worlds of the Thexari buzzed with activity as Queen Sunmi consulted with her advisors. The hive mind that connected all Thexari made decisions quickly, and their conclusion was clear. The humans were too dangerous to trust. They sleep for 20,000 years, then wake claiming to be our saviors, Queen Sunmi declared to her council. No species vanishes for so long without reason. Perhaps they were exiled for good cause. Meanwhile, on the Eternal Vigil, Captain Hyun Seo watched the galactic communications with growing concern. Her consciousness, spread throughout the ship's systems, could monitor thousands of conversations at once. What she heard worried her deeply. They fear us more than they fear the enemy, she told Jin Ho and the other awakened humans. This is exactly what happened 20,000 years ago. The three species that existed then also refused our help until it was almost too late. More human ships were awakening every day. Each ghost ship that came online added its voice to a growing network of communication. Captain Minho of the vessel Dark Star reported successful awakening in the Outer Rim. Captain Kyung-soo of the Silent Thunder announced that his ship's weapons were fully charged and ready. But the awakening process was not without problems. Some ships had suffered damage during their long sleep. Others had lost crew members to system failures over the millennia. Of the original 200 vessels, only 187 responded to the awakening signal. Jin Ho stood in the Eternal Vigil's main observation deck, watching a space around them filled with activity. Human ships were gathering, their dark hulls barely visible against the stars. Each vessel was different, designed for specific roles in the coming war. Our people have changed during the long sleep, he told Taemin, who had remained aboard the human ship as an observer. Some have awakened with abilities they did not have before. Others find it difficult to remember their human emotions and thoughts. Taemin studied the human with concern. Jinho himself had changed since first awakening. His eyes now glowed constantly with that strange purple light, and when he moved, the air around him shimmered with invisible energy. "What is happening to you?" Taemin asked. "We are becoming what we were created to be," Jinho replied. "Our creators designed us to fight beings that exist partially outside normal reality. To do that, we must also exist partially outside normal reality. The more we use our abilities, the less human we become." On the ship's bridge, Soo-jin was working with Dalsu and Boram to analyze the approaching threat. The human science officer had shared data that made all of them feel cold with fear. "The Devourers consume life force itself," she explained, pointing to holographic displays that showed their feeding patterns. "When they attack a world, they don't just kill the inhabitants. They eat their souls, their essence, everything that makes them alive. What remains is empty matter, dead space." Boram's 6 arms worked at multiple control panels simultaneously. According to this data, they destroyed over 50 civilizations before humans fought them 20,000 years ago. Entire species gone without a trace. "That's why we were created," Soo-jin said. "Our makers knew that conventional weapons and normal beings could not fight such creatures. They had to create something new, something that could touch the Devourers where they lived." Dalsu looked up from his studies of the ancient texts. "But your creators are gone now. What happened to them?" "They gave their lives to create us," Soo-jin replied sadly. "The process of making humans capable of fighting the Devourers required sacrificing an entire species. Our creators willingly transformed themselves into the genetic patterns that would become humanity. The weight of that sacrifice hung heavy in the air. An entire ancient civilization had chosen to die so that future life could survive. And now their creation, humanity, was preparing to make a similar sacrifice. The galactic governments are forming a military alliance against us," Captain Hyun Seo announced, her voice coming from speakers throughout the ship. "They see our awakening as an invasion, not a rescue. Fleet movements indicate they plan to force us to submit to their authority." Taemin felt torn between his duty to his own people and what he had learned aboard the human ship. "Maybe I can help negotiate. My captain's rank might carry some weight with the Viridian Council." "We tried negotiation before," Jinho said. 20,000 years ago, the ancient species also demanded that we submit to their control. They wanted to study us, to understand our abilities, to use us as weapons in their own wars. We refused then, and we refuse now. Through the ship's communication systems, they could hear reports from other human vessels. The ghost ships were spreading throughout the galaxy, taking positions near major star systems. Their presence was causing panic among the civilian populations and anger among the military forces. "Unknown vessels. This is Admiral Kwan Su of the Viridian Defense Fleet," came a transmission directed at the human ships. You are ordered to stand down and submit to inspection. Any hostile actions will be met with force. Captain Hyun-seo's response was calm but firm. Admiral Kwon-soo, I am Captain Hyun-seo of the Earth Defense Force. We are not invaders. We are guardians awakening to face an ancient threat. Your weapons cannot harm us, and we do not wish to harm you. Then prove it, Admiral Kwon-soo replied. Submit to our authority and explain your presence in our space. Our space? Jin-ho said with bitter laughter. We were traveling these stars when their species was still learning to make fire. The first battle happened 3 days later. A Thixari battle group, led by War Commander Sang-ho, intercepted a human ship near the edge of Thixari space. The human vessel, called the Void Hammer, was one of the smaller ships in the fleet, carrying only 5,000 sleeping warriors. Human vessel. You will stand down and prepare to be boarded, War Commander Sang-ho transmitted. The Void Hammer's captain, a human named Dong-wook, tried to explain their peaceful intentions. But the Thixari commander had his orders. When the human ship refused to submit, the Thixari opened fire. The battle was over in minutes. The Thixari weapons passed harmlessly through the human ship's strange shields. In response, Captain Dong-wook activated weapons that bent space itself. The Thixari flagship simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but unmade, as if it had never been built. By the 7 crystals, Taemin whispered when he saw the battle reports. What kind of weapons are those? Dark matter manipulators, Soo-jin explained. We can touch the fundamental forces that hold reality together. But using such weapons changes us further. Captain Dong-wook will be less human now than he was before the battle. The victory sent shockwaves through the galactic community. If humans could destroy their most advanced warships so easily, what chance did anyone have against them? Fear turned to panic, and panic led to desperate decisions. The 3 species are forming a joint military force, Captain Hyun-seo reported. Over 10,000 ships from all 3 fleets are gathering at the Nexus station. They plan to attack our main fleet. Jin-ho looked at Taemin with sadness in his glowing eyes. This is exactly what happened before. The ancient species spent so much time fighting us that they were not prepared when the real enemy arrived. How long do we have? Taemin asked. Soo-jin checked her instruments. Our deep space sensors are detecting more Devourer scouts every day. The main force will arrive within 2 months, maybe less. And the Galactic Alliance? They will attack us within the week. On worlds throughout the galaxy, people watched the news with growing fear. Some called for war against the mysterious humans. Others begged their leaders to listen to the warnings about the approaching Devourers. But fear of the unknown was stronger than fear of something they could not see. In the depths of space, Captain Hyun-seo made a decision that would change everything. She opened a channel to all human ships and all galactic governments simultaneously. People of the galaxy, she said, her voice carrying across 1,000 worlds. We did not choose to become what we are. We were created to fight an enemy that threatens all life. In 20,000 years of sleep, we have dreamed of peace, of a time when our purpose would no longer be needed. The war between humanity and the Galactic Alliance began with the largest space battle in recorded history. Near the Nexus station, 10,000 ships from the 3 species faced off against 12 human vessels. The numbers seemed impossible, but Taemin had learned not to judge human capabilities by normal standards. Admiral Kwon-soo commanded the Viridian forces from his flagship, the Crystal Fortress. Beside him, Thixari War Commander Sang-ho led his insectoid fleet in perfect formation. The Sithari Deep Admiral Hae-young brought her waterborne warriors from the ocean worlds. Together they represented the combined might of galactic civilization. Human vessels, this is your final warning, Admiral Kwon-soo broadcast. Surrender now or be destroyed. Captain Hyun-seo's response came from the largest human ship, a vessel so massive it dwarfed even the greatest Alliance dreadnoughts. Admiral, you are making a terrible mistake. While we fight each other, the real enemy grows closer. Please stand down and let us protect you. The only protection we need is from you, Admiral Kwon-soo replied. He gave the order to attack. What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. The Alliance ships opened fire with every weapon they had. Energy beams, plasma cannons, and fusion missiles filled space with deadly light. But when the weapons reached the human ships, something impossible happened. The energy passed through them as if they were ghosts. Impossible. War Commander Sang-ho clicked in disbelief. Our weapons are not affecting them at all. From the human ships came a response that defied understanding. Captain Minho, commanding a vessel called the Starbreaker, activated weapons that seemed to tear holes in space itself. Where his dark matter cannon struck, Alliance ships simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not exploded, just gone. The Battle of Nexus Station lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 3/4 of the Alliance fleet had been unmade. The surviving ships fled in terror, carrying news of humanity's impossible power to every corner of the galaxy. But the victory came at a cost that only the humans understood. Captain Minho had aged 50 years in those 6 hours, his body paying the price for using abilities that bent reality itself. His hair had turned white, and his eyes now burned with the same otherworldly fire that consumed Jinho. Each time we use our true power, we become less human, Captain Hyun-seo explained to the other ship commanders. This is the burden our creators placed upon us. To save others, we must sacrifice our own humanity. Taemin watched the aftermath of the battle from the Eternal Vigil's observation deck. The space around Nexus Station was filled with debris from destroyed ships and rescue craft searching for survivors. His own people, the Viridians, had lost 2/3 of their fleet. I should be angry, he said to Jinho. Those were my people who died out there. Jinho, whose appearance had also changed during the battle, nodded sadly. Anger is a human emotion. I find it harder to feel such things now. The more we use our abilities, the more we become like the forces we manipulate, cold, distant, inevitable. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy. The human victory at Nexus Station had broken the Alliance's will to fight, but it had also created panic among civilian populations. Entire star systems were evacuating, fleeing from both humans and the approaching threat they warned about. Then came the news that changed everything. Captain, Soo-jin called from her station, her voice tight with fear. Long-range sensors are detecting something at the edge of the Kepler system. It's not good. The main screen filled with images from the system's outer monitoring stations. At first, there was nothing but empty space where the planet Kepler 7 should have been. Then the cameras adjusted and everyone on the bridge saw the truth. Kepler 7 was gone. Not destroyed, not broken apart, simply absent. Where a thriving world of 4 billion Thixari had existed, there was now only empty space. The planet had been consumed completely, leaving not even debris behind. The Devourers, Jinho whispered. They're here. More reports flooded in over the next few hours. 3 more outer rim planets had vanished completely. The monitoring stations that observed their disappearance sent the same terrifying message. Creatures of living darkness had simply absorbed the worlds, consuming everything from the planetary cores to the orbital stations. On Thixari Prime, Queen Sunmi felt the deaths of 4 billion of her children through the hive-mind connection. The psychic shock nearly killed her, and her remaining subjects felt her pain across their empire. The humans were telling the truth, she transmitted to the other Alliance leaders. The enemy they warned us about is real. Admiral Kwan-Su, his crystal body cracked from stress, watched the sensor readings from his damaged flagship. Our weapons cannot touch these creatures. Energy passes through them, matter cannot harm them. How do we fight something that exists partially outside our reality? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dalsu, the Viridian archaeologist who had stayed aboard the Eternal Vigil, had been studying human records and ancient databases. What he found horrified him. The Devourers are not just consuming our reality, he explained to the assembled leaders via holographic communication. They are rewriting it. Every world they absorb becomes part of their dimensional space. They're turning our galaxy into something that exists in their realm instead of ours. Captain Hyun-seo's hologram appeared in the communication chamber, looking more solid and real than she had before. The approaching crisis was forcing her consciousness to become more focused, more present. This is why our creators made us, she said. Normal beings cannot fight the Devourers because normal beings exist entirely in normal space. We were designed to exist partially in their dimension, giving us the ability to hurt them. But at what cost? Admiral Kwan-Su asked. Your warriors are becoming less human with each battle. What will you be when this war is over? We will be what we need to be to win, Captain Hyun-seo replied simply. The first direct confrontation between humans and Devourers happened 3 days later. A human patrol ship, the Nightwalker, encountered a Devourer scout near the remains of Kepler 7. Captain Young-sik, commanding the patrol ship, engaged the creature immediately. The battle was unlike anything recorded in galactic history. The Devourer appeared as a mass of living shadow, constantly changing shape and size. Tentacles of pure darkness reached for the human ship, seeking to absorb it as they had absorbed the planets. But when the darkness touched the Nightwalker's hull, something unprecedented happened. The ship's shields, powered by human consciousness and dark matter manipulation, pushed back against the creature. For the first time in the Devourer's existence, something resisted their touch. Captain Jung-sik activated his ship's primary weapon, a reality anchor that forced the creature to exist more completely in normal space. Once anchored, the Devourer could be hurt by conventional attacks. The Nightwalker's dark matter cannons tore into the creature, causing it to scream across multiple dimensions. The scout died, its form dissolving into nothingness. But the victory came at a terrible price. Captain Jung-sik and half his crew had sacrificed their humanity completely, becoming beings of pure energy and consciousness. They were no longer recognizable as the people they had once been. The transformation is accelerating, Su-jin reported after studying the battle data. Combat with the Devourers forces our people to use abilities at maximum power. The more we fight them, the faster we lose our human nature. News of the successful battle spread across the galaxy within hours. For the first time since the crisis began, there was hope. The Devourers could be fought, could be killed, but the price was becoming clear to everyone. Admiral Kwan-Su contacted the human fleet directly. Captain Hyun-seo, my government is prepared to offer a formal alliance. We will provide whatever support you need, as will the Sithari, Deep Admiral Hae-young added. Our shipyards and resources are at your disposal. Queen Sunmi's transmission was filled with grief for her lost children, but also determination. The Thixari will fight alongside you. These creatures must be stopped, whatever the cost. Captain Hyun-seo's response was thoughtful and sad. We accept your alliance, but understand what you are asking. To defeat the Devourers, we must become like them in some ways. We will save your worlds and your people, but we may not be recognizable as human when it is over. Then we will remember you as you were, Taimin said from his position on the Eternal Vigil's bridge, and honor what you sacrificed for us. The alliance was formalized within days. Human ships took positions throughout the galaxy, while alien fleets provided support and resources. Factories on 100 worlds began producing the special equipment humans needed for their reality-warping weapons. But even as the galaxy united, more worlds fell to the Devourers. The creatures were not attacking randomly. They were targeting key systems, cutting supply lines and communication networks. It was clear they possessed intelligence and strategy. They're preparing for something, Jinho observed. His appearance had changed dramatically over the past weeks. His body now glowed with internal energy, and his eyes had become pools of swirling dark matter. This is not their full attack. They're weakening us for what comes next. Deep space sensors began detecting massive energy signatures approaching from beyond the galactic edge. The center of the galaxy had never seen such a gathering of ships. 150 human vessels formed a defensive sphere around the galactic core, while thousands of allied ships from the three species provided support from safer distances. At the heart of it all, the massive black hole that anchored their galaxy spun silently, unaware that the fate of reality itself was about to be decided in its vicinity. Taemin stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, watching the preparations for what everyone knew would be the final battle. Around him, humans worked at stations with movements that no longer seemed entirely natural. Their bodies glowed with internal energy, and their eyes held the deep purple fire of controlled dark matter. The dimensional tear is growing larger, Su-jin reported. She had changed the most of anyone Taemin knew. Her body was now partially translucent, and when she moved, reality seemed to bend around her. At current expansion rate, it will encompass the entire galactic core within 6 hours. Captain Hyun-seo's hologram appeared more solid than ever before. The approaching crisis had forced her consciousness to manifest almost completely in normal space. All human vessels prepare for final transformation. Authorization code Omega-77. Across the fleet, captains acknowledged the order with voices that carried both determination and sadness. Taemin didn't understand what final transformation meant until Jinho explained. We are going to stop holding back, Jinho said. His body was now more energy than matter, shifting between human form and something else entirely. Until now, we have tried to preserve some part of our humanity. In the final battle, we will use our abilities without restraint. What will happen to you? Taman asked. We will become what our creators intended us to become. Living weapons capable of fighting beings that exist outside normal reality. But we will no longer be human in any meaningful sense. Through the viewports, they could see the dimensional tear growing larger. It appeared as a wound in space itself, through which impossible geometries and writhing darkness were visible. The Devourers were not just entering their galaxy. They were remaking it in their own image. Contact from the Alliance fleet, Boram announced from her station. Even the Thexari engineer had been affected by prolonged exposure to human abilities. Her insectoid body now shimmered with traces of dark matter energy. Admiral Kwansu's voice filled the bridge. Captain Hyun Seo, our combined governments have authorized me to deliver this message. Whatever you are about to become, we will remember what you were, and we will tell our children that when darkness came for our worlds, humanity stood in its way. Thank you, Admiral, Captain Hyun Seo replied. Keep your ships at maximum safe distance. What happens next will be dangerous even for our allies. The first wave of Devourers emerged from the dimensional tear like a tide of living darkness. They were larger than any scouts the galaxy had encountered before, some the size of small moons. Their forms shifted constantly between shadow and substance, tentacles and teeth. Hunger given impossible shape. Captain Minho of the Starbreaker was the first to engage. His ship, now more than half merged with dark matter, met the leading Devourer head-on. The collision sent shockwaves through multiple dimensions, causing reality itself to ripple like disturbed water. Reality anchor deployed, Minho reported, his voice no longer entirely human. Target is being forced into normal space. Once anchored in their dimension, the Devourer could be hurt by human weapons. The Starbreaker's main cannon, powered by the life force of its captain and crew, tore into the creature. Dark matter met dark matter in the explosion that briefly created a new star, but the victory came at a price visible to everyone watching. The Starbreaker's crew had burned away their remaining humanity in that single attack. They were now beings of pure energy, no longer recognizable as the people they had once been. All ships engage at will, Captain Hyun Seo ordered. Show them why we were created. The battle that followed defied description. Human ships fought creatures of living darkness while space itself warped around them. Reality anchors forced the Devourers into forms that could be hurt, while dark matter weapons tore them apart atom by atom. Captain Young Woo of the Nighthammer sacrificed his ship and crew to destroy 3 Devourers at once, creating a dimensional implosion that briefly opened a window into the void between universes. Captain So Young of the Star's End used her vessel as a weapon itself, ramming it into the largest Devourer while her crew channeled all their life energy into the ship's core. One by one, the human ships and their crews burned themselves out in acts of sacrifice that saved entire sectors of the galaxy. But for every Devourer destroyed, 2 more emerged from the growing dimensional tear. We're not winning, Sujin reported, her voice now echoing with harmonics from other dimensions. The tear is growing faster than we can destroy the creatures coming through it. Then we stop the tear itself, Captain Hyun Seo decided. All remaining ships converge on the dimensional rupture. We're going inside. Captain, Jin Ho said, his form now barely recognizable as human. If we enter their dimension, we may never be able to return. I know, she replied, but if we don't stop them at the source, they will consume everything. The final phase of the battle began as 50 remaining human ships approached the dimensional tear. The space around it was twisted into impossible shapes, where up and down had no meaning and time flowed in circles. Allied fleet, this is Captain Hyun Seo. She broadcast on all frequencies. We are entering the enemy dimension to close the rupture from within. If we succeed, the tear will collapse and the threat will end. If we fail, you won't fail, Admiral Kwansu replied. We have faith in you. Remember us as we were, Captain Hyun Seo said simply. Then the human fleet plunged into the dimensional tear and vanished from normal space. What happened next could only be observed through the distortions in space-time around the rupture. The human ships found themselves in a realm where physical laws worked differently, where thought and reality were the same thing. Here, the Devourers existed in their true form, not as individual creatures but as part of a single vast entity that had been consuming universes for billions of years. The entity was ancient beyond measure, a cosmic force that existed to unmake creation itself. It had consumed countless galaxies, turning them into empty void where nothing could ever exist again. But it had never encountered anything like humanity. "We are the creation of those you destroyed first," Captain Hyun-seo declared. Her consciousness now spread across all 50 ships simultaneously. "We are their final gift to the universe, their answer to your hunger." The battle in the other dimension lasted only minutes in normal time, but eons in the twisted space where it was fought. Human consciousness, freed from the constraints of physical bodies, fought the cosmic entity on terms it had never experienced before. Jin-ho, Min-ho, Kyung-soo, and the others who had led humanity's awakening merged their essences into weapons of pure will and determination. They carved into the entity's core, finding the dimensional anchors that held the tier open. "Now," Captain Hyun-seo commanded, and every human consciousness in the other dimension focused on a single task. They became a dimensional anchor themselves, forcing the entity and the rupture to exist entirely in normal space where it could be destroyed. The explosion that followed lit up half the galaxy. The dimensional tear collapsed in on itself, taking the cosmic entity with it. Space twisted, reality bent, and for a moment the laws of physics themselves seemed to pause. When it was over, the dimensional rupture was gone. The devourers throughout the galaxy simply ceased to exist, their connection to their home dimension severed. The threat that had consumed countless civilizations was finally ended, but the cost was total. No human ships emerged from the collapsed dimensional tear. The entire species had sacrificed itself to save the galaxy, becoming part of the dimensional barrier that would forever prevent the entity's return. In the aftermath, the three species worked together to rebuild what had been lost. Memorial stations were built at every location where human ships had fought and died. The story of their sacrifice was taught to every child in the galaxy. Taemin, now an old crystal formation after decades of leading the memorial project, often stood before the monument at the galactic core. It was a simple structure, listing the names of every human who had died in the final battle. "They saved us all," he would tell young visitors. "They gave up everything they were so that we could continue to exist." But sometimes, in the quiet spaces between stars, strange signals could be detected. Energy patterns that seemed almost like voices, speaking in the ancient human language. Scientists debated whether these were echoes from the past or something else entirely. Dalsu, in his final years, believed he had found the answer in his studies. "They're still out there," he wrote in his last paper. "Not as humans anymore, but as guardians. They've become part of the fabric of space itself, watching over us from beyond the edge of reality." The galaxy had learned to live with both the knowledge of what had been saved and what had been lost. The three species worked together more closely than ever before, united by the shared experience of being protected by beings willing to sacrifice everything for others.